M1, we've got a lane blocked here as well. A car's broken down from junction 28 for Alfreton to junction 29 for Chesterfield and Mansfield. Merseyside now, the northbound M57 is partially blocked. There's been an accident between junction 4 for Knowlesley to the A59 at Switch Island, and the eastbound M62, we've got a car having a tyre change at junction 7 for Rainhill Stoops. There's more in half an hour.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, yet more sleaze engulfing UK politics with another MP under investigation. What is going on in our politics? Was it always this bad? Is it getting worse? And what do you think is at the root of it all? Your thoughts on that? And something that I'm absolutely livid about today, I'm asking you, why on earth are primary schools in Scotland, that's children as young as 4 and 5, apparently signing up to an LGBT charter, which requires the school to, among other things, have gender-neutral toilets, survey their pupils about their sexuality and celebrate National Coming Out Day, and more. I remind you, these kids are as young as 4 and 5 years old. What on earth is going on? And get this, a survey says that just 40% of us trust the police. Are you one of those people? If not, why not? Why do you not trust them? And calls to modern-day slavery helplines are through the roof. How on earth do we fix this issue? Yes, indeed, that's all to come in this next hour. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live to tonight's 6 o'clock news headlines.
Good evening. The top story from the GB Newsroom today. Andrew Malkinson, who 20 years ago was wrongly jailed for rape, has rejected the Criminal Cases Review Commission's unreserved apology for him, saying it's been too little, too late. 57-year-old Andrew Malkinson was found guilty of raping a woman in Manchester in 2003, and a year later he was jailed for life. He could have been released after 6 years if he'd given a false confession, something he was never prepared to do, instead always protesting his innocence. His conviction was overturned after fresh DNA evidence linked the crime to another man. Mr Malkinson applied for his case to be referred to the Court of Appeal, but was blocked by the Review Board twice. The Lord Chancellor has called his case an atrocious miscarriage of justice. The UK and the United States have today announced new sanctions on a number of Iranian individuals in response to Iran's drone and missile attack on Israel at the weekend. Lord Cameron has been meeting with G7 leaders in Italy today. He says the action demonstrates the UK's unequivocal condemnation of Iran's attack on a sovereign state. He said not only was Iran's reckless attack a total failure, but they've revealed to the world their nature as a malign influence. Britain is also freezing the assets of some Iranian organisations, including the country's Navy and Chief of Staff in the Army. It adds to the more than 400 sanctions already imposed on Iranian assets. Former Scottish National Party Chief Executive and husband of ex-First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, Peter Murrell, has been arrested again over the party's finances. The 59-year-old was previously arrested and released without charge last April. He was taken into custody this morning and is being questioned by Police Scotland. Mr Murrell resigned as the party's chief executive last March. And the Scottish Government has scrapped its interim target aimed at reducing the country's carbon emissions by 75% by 2030. The Minister for Net Zero said while the original target is admittedly unattainable now, a revised package of climate action measures will deliver Scotland's transition to net zero at a pace that is feasible. Greenpeace, though, have gone on record on Twitter or X this afternoon saying the Scottish Government's decision to scrap their climate target is embarrassing and infuriating. But the First Minister, Humza Yousaf, told the Scottish Parliament the overall net zero goal by 2045 will not budge.
The Climate Change Committee were always clear with us that the 2030 target was a stretch target. That was clear to all of us when we all committed, when we all backed that target in the first place. But what doesn't change and what won't change is that end destination of 2045.
Sir Keir Starmer says the Rwanda scheme is just a gimmick and a waste of taxpayers' money after the latest blow to the government's flagship bill in the House of Lords last night. The Labour leader's comments came as Downing Street declined to recommit to the Prime Minister's spring deadline to get deportation flights off the ground. It's understood Number 10 will be giving more detail about the timing of those flights once the legislation has passed successfully through Parliament. MPs will now consider the Lords' amendments to the bill, but the government has indicated it won't be making any concessions. Labour is calling for police to investigate allegations that a Conservative MP misused thousands of pounds of Tory party campaign funds. The Times reports that Mark Menzies used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off what he called bad people who he says locked him in a room and demanded a ransom. He denies any wrongdoing but has agreed to give up the Conservative whip. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the scandal is another reason the country needs change.
I'll be honest, there's a degree of frustration as well. We're 2 weeks away from really important local and mayoral elections when, there's a lot of positive arguments that we want to make about the change we can bring about in these elections. And yet again, we're talking about misbehaviour by Tory MPs. And if ever you needed evidence of why we need to turn the page on this shower and have a fresh start with Labour, I think it's in these allegations coming out today.
Sir Keir Starmer. And Team GB has unveiled its brand new Olympic kit ahead of the Paris Games this summer. The kit features the classic red, white and blue British colours, and Adidas, who've produced the clothing, said the aim was to create a design that celebrates the unique aspects of Great Britain whilst also encapsulating the passion of each and every athlete. That's the news. For the latest stories, do sign up to GB News Alerts. Scan that QR code on your screen right now or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much for that, Polly. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, my panel of former editor of The Sun, Kelvin McKenzie, and the broadcast journalist, Judita De Silva. Good evening to both of you. I think it's quite cute today, everybody. Look, they've accidentally come dressed in matching colours. Look at
matching
this.
Orange.
They've got orange and navy.
Yep.
I don't know what's going on among these two. It's not for me to speculate, but I think it's quite cute. I quite like it. Look at that.
Look at that.
I know, very sweet. Juditha's thinking, I wish that I definitely was something else right now. And I like it, a little splash of colour. Anyway, what's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email me, you can tweet me, you can get in on our website, gbnews.com/yoursay, and you can join the conversation there. We'll be bringing you into the conversation as we go on, worry not. But today, another day and another Tory sleaze scandal. This time, you've just been hearing about it, actually, in the headlines. Mark Menzies there, he is the MP for Flyde. He's lost the whip now. I think he's voluntarily handed it over. It's not in Scotland, by the way. I think when you hear that constituency name, many people think it's Scotland. It's not. It borders, actually, Blackpool South. You'll be familiar with that constituency, of course, because of Scott Benton and the goings-on there. Anyway, this... Rishi Sunak, Kelvin, needs this like a hole in the head. He must want to get hold of his party and give them the biggest shaking of their lives, because this is just not going to end well for him.
No, it's not. And, of course, some of his colleagues, his senior colleagues, have known all about this since January. And I noticed that Mr Menzies is denying some of the allegations. However, that won't stop the local people of his town actually seeking to have him deselected. So I'm afraid his career has come to an end, and they have a 16,000-seat majority, the Conservatives, a massive blue area, right? That will disappear in a heartbeat because of this man's... Well, I'm not sure... Let's look upon it in a generous way and say it's stupidity. But the other people who are in the firing line must be the Conservative leadership. Why is it they had to leave it to the Times to carry out a detailed investigation today, right? Otherwise, the local people would have known nothing at all about what this man has been getting up to, or actually how money that they put forward for the Mr Menzies election campaign, was being used to pay somebody to free him from a flat in London 300 miles away. How would you feel about that if that was your money?
Well, are you one of his constituents? What do you make to it all? I've got to say, again, he does actually deny this. And you say, actually, that this could hurt him. You might be familiar with the fact that I think it was back in 2014, was it? He was actually engulfed in another scandal. Was it 2014? Yeah,
yes,
it feels like I was just checking my notes, because it actually feels like much longer ago than that. I think I can bring up some of the headlines relating to that there. He had to quit his ministerial role. This is in relation to what that tabloid there is calling a drugs and rent boy scandal. But let me tell you, right, that was in 2014. He was then re-elected in 2015 with a 13,000 majority, re-elected in 2017 with a 12,000 majority, and re-elected in 2019 with a 16,000 majority. So maybe this scandal isn't really...
No, this will see him out the door. I mean, the atmosphere is completely different from 2019, where we all saw sunlit uplands approaching, right? Now it's over for him, and actually he'd do everybody a very good favour if he just stood down now. I know there are some arguments...
But if he's innocent, like you're saying, why would you stand down?
Well, let's see. I tell you what, that's a very good point. Why don't we see him come out publicly on GB News or somewhere else and answer the allegations published in the Times today, step by step? Did the phone call take place? Where was the flat? Why did he need £5,000? Why was he prepared to take it out of local party funds? There are a whole series of allegations which he needs to respond to, rather than the general one.
Well, you're very welcome. If you are watching this, you're very welcome to come on this programme and answer those questions. Juditha, what do you make to it all?
I just think that it's indicative of an entire administration that's rotten from the top down, because since the wake of the cataclysmic demise from grace of Boris Johnson, it seems to be scandal after scandal, and there is no limit to what rank it reaches within the Tories. And going into an election, they must have to ask themselves that if you've lost the trust of the public, the respect of the public, and the proof that you are competent at the positions you hold to be effective as a government, what is the point of you? So it's a party that needs to really fundamentally clean house in order to go forward, whether it's in leadership or not.
But this isn't unique just to the Tories. I mean, of course, they are the ones in power now, but I remember the washing machine salesman Keith Vaz, for example. So this is not just something that happens to this one particular party. There's something going on, perhaps more broadly, among politicians And I don't know what it is. I was trying to be kind today to everyone, and I was thinking, is it something to do with the strange working setup? You know, these guys are often hundreds of miles away from their families and their homes. They're working all the hours God sends. They've got all of these bars in their place of work within Parliament. Is there something... the way that they're working?
You know that there's that saying, absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's that intoxication that comes with power that gives you the perception that you are beyond accountability, because there's always a myriad of people whose job it is to protect you having achieved that power, because you become an asset. And as an asset, you're beneficial to a lot of people, particularly when you have the Tories in power. And so you have a situation where you have people that otherwise might not do immoral things, but have been cultivated and nurtured to believe that if you do, we will help you clean it up, as long as you carry on and toe the party line. So what you now have to address is the mentality of the people that work within your party to think that there is accountability, and just because you occupy a position of power, you're not devoid of having to face that.
Indeed. One of my audience, Peter, says the sickness in Parliament has always been there. He says, but now it's simply that the light is shining on it. Philip says, what on earth is going on? The people that are supposed to be setting the standards for us mere mortals to follow have gone to the dogs. And speaking about accountability, the whole Rayner thing, Angela Rayner thing, that's not going away anytime soon. And I thought it was quite interesting that Keir Starmer and other people have said that this is all classism. People are criticising Angela and digging into her, you know, dealings because she's working class. Do you believe that?
No, not only do I not believe that. Had the reverse been true, had she been from say, a wealthy class and had gone to some rather exotic private school and got a fantastic degree at Oxford or Cambridge or something like that, and she had been fiddling her, allegedly, let's get that in, had been mixing up getting single council tax allowance when she had a member of the family staying there, which is the essential criminal element to this, the row would have been even bigger than it is now. At the moment, she's the person in the barrel. Let me guarantee to you, I know that I'm somewhat older than both of you. In fact, both of you
put together. I was just about to say put together.
Fine. I guarantee to you that any period of time of anybody in power, they are guaranteed, so I agree with you totally on this, they're guaranteed to be up to their necks in God knows what. With the Tories, it's always sex, and with Labour, it's always money.
Let's just look at Keir Starmer today before I come back to Juditha. Listen to what he was saying on this.
We've got a billionaire Prime Minister and a billionaire Prime Minister, both of whose families have used schemes to avoid millions of pounds of tax, smearing a working-class woman.
What do you make to that, Juditha?
I mean, obviously he's using a very charged vocabulary to get a reaction, but the fundamentals of the argument do hold water, because when you look at the degree of transgression, let's say it's alleged now, but let's say in worst case scenario she's guilty. It's so marginal, the error that she has made, by comparison to what the Tories are having to deal with. The zeal with which they are attacking her, you have to say, it isn't measurable by comparison. And it's obviously because it's kind of diversion tactics. There is so much mess within their own party. Any slight thing that goes wrong, divert attention towards it, shine the light as bright as you can on it, and then people don't focus on the problems you have at home.
I don't think it's that. I think it's actually you reap what you sow, and our kind of political spectrum and the focus, it's become so ridiculous, so low level, so low rent. Anyone that remembers the ridiculous obsession about things like, did Boris Johnson eat a slice of cake during that work meeting? People lost their marbles over it. They were obsessed with each tiny little detail. And when you work at that level, when you try and bring it down to such a, like, I would argue, quite a stupid level, really, then you can't start crying when that visits you in return.
But I think the difference in that is how quick she has been to step up and say, if I am proven to have done something wrong, I will step down. What people found the biggest problem was with Boris Johnson is the point we made before, his feeling that he was above accountability. Every time people asked him a question, it was, we'll wait for Sue Gray's report. The fact is, there are things that have been done wrong, and you refuse to face them or even say that, should I be proven wrong or should I have been said to have done something wrong, I will step down. He always behaved like he was made of Teflon, and that really exacerbated a problem that otherwise might have been dealt with quite quickly.
Yeah, but if my memory serves me right, which I think it does, I'm sure Angela Rayner tweeted about Boris Johnson and said he's under police investigation, he should go. And she tweeted that when he was under investigation. And this is what I mean. If you call for someone to go just for being investigated for something, no resolution to that investigation, they could be innocent or guilty, who knows. But if you're calling for a resignation at that point, then it's a bit of double standard when you don't think you yourself should resign at that point of investigation.
To an extent, but I think it was such a protracted period, and it was compounded by accusation after accusation piling on top of one another with a complete perception that he refused to take accountability for any of it. That's what drives you to a point of frustration where you then say that this is a guy that should just go. So indeed, she's being burned by her own wick, but then it's what she said at the time did hold water based on how far Boris Johnson had pushed it.
Well, there you go. What do you make of it all? Darren has been in touch saying, Michelle, Menzies is my mum's MP. He says you could put a blue rosette on pretty much anything, anyone in this constituency, and a large percentage of people will still vote Tory. Do you agree with that? Are you also in that constituency? Is that still the case now, though? Because things have changed, haven't they, quite a lot since 2019. Someone else says, thank you for bringing up Keith Faz. Many people actually seem to forget about those things. We need decent MPs. We do. Have we got any? Is there any MPs among them that actually you think are actually pretty damn good at what they do? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts on that. There's lots I want to talk to you about after the break. I want to ask you, why on earth do primary schools apparently need to be signing up to an LGBT charter? That's kids of 5 and 6. What on earth are we doing? Discussing things like sexuality, etc., with young children that age. I worry there's a little bit of indoctrination going on. We'll look at that story and more after the break.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Is it OK to call people fat? I won't call Bev fat because she isn't. She won't call me fat because I'm not. But the fitness fanatic, Derek Evans, you might know him better as 90s icon Mr Motivator, recently told a podcast diabetes have gone through the roof. You should be able to call people fat.
Well, he joins us now. Good morning, Derek. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to see you. So I think what you're getting at is this idea that we've become so polite about weight that we're ignoring the elephant in the room. If you'll forgive the phraseology there, and actually, sometimes you've got to be cruel to be kind.
Well, actually, you know, this has been taken out of all context. I actually didn't say you're entitled to call people fat. What I did say is that in the 80s and 90s, I remember the way I got into television, there was a gentleman walking at reception while I was waiting for the people I was training. And for some reason, I got up and I prodded him in the belly. And I said to him, you need to deal with that. That was fat. We have a nation where obesity, diabetes is killing every one of us. And unless we take responsibility for our health, rather than waiting for government to do this, government to do that, it is our responsibility, right, to look after our independence and our health. And as we get older, it's even more critical, right? And that's why I'm here as an example saying to you, listen, I'm 71 years of age and movement is medicine. And you can't sit around watching television and not going out to the gym or wherever. You will never, ever be able to look after your family and everything you've worked for. You will lose it. I've never seen a deposit account behind a hearse. No matter what you work for, the most important thing you can do with your life is every hour, do something active. Every hour.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry. We're with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The we being the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the broadcast journalist Judita De Silva. One of my viewers have got in touch saying, how can Labour criticise things like investigations when we still don't really know what on earth's gone on with Nick Brown? I've asked about Nick Brown many times. I'm telling you, trying to get an answer as to what is going on there is absolutely incredibly difficult. Richard says, you're going to talk about Scotland in a minute. He says, I love Scotland. I've had some great holidays, but politically, he says, his words, it's gone doolally. That's one of my viewers on the website there. And I can tell you, there's a lot going on in Scotland today. Not least, of course, you've seen Nicola Sturgeon's husband get arrested. You've seen one of their key net zero targets being dropped. I'll come on to those things. But one of the things that kind of stopped me in my tracks today is this revelation. It's been released by The Telegraph, actually. And what they're suggesting is that there is this charity, LGBT Youth Scotland, it's called. And what they're apparently doing is schools, primary schools in some cases, apparently, have been signing up to their LGBT charter. Now, I'll tell you just some of the things. It costs between £850 and £2,000 to sign up for this. What you do, there's all these different stages that you can reach. If you want to get to gold status, you've got to do things like appoint at least 2 pupils and 2 staff members as LGBT champions. Remember that these pupils, of course, are as young as 4. They're talking about you need to have unisex toilets, basically, like gender-neutral toilets. They urge these people on these schemes, these schools on these schemes, to celebrate National Coming Out Day, Transgender Day of Visibility. And I find this really quite concerning. What they're suggesting as well is that schools' policies should be rewritten in areas such as transgender inclusion and so on and so forth. They celebrate that they say that they are changing the culture and the ethos of Scottish schools. I get very concerned about this as a mum to a young boy that imminently will be starting primary school. I don't believe, Kelvin, that adult sexual issues have got any place being taught to 5-year-old children. What do you think?
Well, you know, clearly I don't either, and why the children can't be allowed just to do painting and generally learn about the first steps in life without having some of the more serious issues thrust at them which are going to come at them, you know, probably within the next by the time they're into their teens. It's beyond me. The other thing is, of course, with these charities, of course, publicity is good for them. Publicity does 2 things. It gives them some kind of credence when no matter how crackpot they might be, and it also almost certainly brings them money. And within Scotland right now, it's so much a kind of foreign country now, which is what they want to do, that they quite enjoy introducing these kinds of ideas which they know are likely to aggravate the paymaster, which is the English taxpayer.
Well, no, actually, because this particular one in Scotland, they've received almost £500,000 in taxpayer funding from the SNP government, a further £340,000 from local authorities, and NHS organisations have apparently handed over another £154,000. Judita, what do you make to all this?
I think what's kind of happening is, in a weird way, I can understand and I see the righteousness and validity of the motivation behind it, but the execution is flawed, because what you have is adults who have lived an experience where they dealt with so much, where they felt they were othered, whether it was in school or in university or at work, and they're thinking, how could my life have been better? And thinking by putting things in place to make other potentially LGBTQIA plus children have a better life, they've done something good, they've left a better legacy. That's a righteous thing, but the execution is poor, because like you said, and I agree, children shouldn't be politicized and shouldn't be sexualized. A 4-year-old should not be be thinking about who they fancy. Just paint with potatoes and leave it at that. But then you have to think that there are ways to institute an educational environment where a child going to school knows that sometimes Lucy might have a dad and a dad, or a mum and a mum. Or if one day I look at a boy and I'm a boy and I really want to ask them to the school dance, that's okay. I shouldn't feel weird. So that's why I say I understand the motivation.
Well, that took about 2 seconds to explain that. Families are different. Some people have 2 mums, 2 dads. Some people don't have a mum. Some people don't have a dad. I don't know. Some people are brought up by their grandparents because their parents have passed away, whatever. Families come in different shapes and sizes. That took me and you about 2 minutes to explain. We don't need to be spending thousands of pounds to sign up to these very odd... To me, personally, I think there's something sinister in this, that this organisation, or organisations plural, because there's loads of people doing this, that organisations are charging schools to be part of this odd league table about who's trying to outdo who when it comes to who is more trans-inclusive with the kids than the next person. There's something makes me uneasy about this.
Supposing a child comes home and says, you think, oh, I've done well today. He said, well, how have you done? He said, well, I was #1 painter, or I was #1 reader. No, I wasn't. I was made LGBT champion. This is a 4- and 5-year-old. Look, I can understand this, actually, as we develop into the secondary school. I can understand more debates taking place. I cannot understand why we have to thrust it at young children. And I think if you ask the parents, they'd be hostile to it. And what about the role the teacher has to play in all this? And then at the same time, they're supposed to spend money changing all the lavatories.
Yes.
And all this. Isn't it bizarre?
What you have now is that society has been one way, the pendulum is swinging the other way, and they're pushing it very far in order to kind of proliferate change. And this is probably the toughest period in that evolutionary process, because the LGBTQ+ community is saying that you've got to really rage against the machine to get people to listen. Because put it like this now, even this conversation, the whole country is listening, the whole world is listening. These are the kinds of eyeballs and ears they haven't had before. And there's going to be friction. There's going to be a locking of heads in the process to getting to a point where you establish a new equilibrium where they feel more incorporated into society.
Can I just ask a question? Perhaps you know the answer to this. Are there members of the gay community? Are all the members of the gay community, are they in favour of this, or is this some crackpot charity that can do well in Scotland but can't do it anywhere? I suspect anywhere else. Where is the demand from the gay community for this kind of indoctrination or this discussion to take place?
That
with
is
4-
where
and 5-year-olds?
I feel like that's a very good point, because one thing I was going to say is that what people always have to bear in mind is, in a lot of minority groups, the people who shout loudest are the most extreme. The people who tend to agree with pragmatic thinking and gently does it just want to get on with their lives. I know a lot of, in my day-to-day life and the work I've done over the years, trans people, gay people, lesbians who said that I'm not going to get on social media and howl at the moon. I don't agree with this, but I've been through so much trying to get to a point where I'm happy in my life. I'm not going to invite more stress into it. I just want to get on with it. So that's why I said that it's going to take time, where the militant voices will eventually be hushed, because, like I've said, the greatest force of allies that the LGBTQ+ community has always had is heterosexual women. What you're moving towards now is doing things that is beginning to turn them from allies into people who feel that, oh, for you to thrive, I'm being deprived, and that's a problem. When they realise you're alienating allies, they will understand you've got to recalibrate to have that kind of understanding between both parties.
You say that everybody's listening. My child won't be listening, because if my child was in a school and then they was deciding aged 4, 5, we're going to have this trans, identification day or whatever they call it. I wouldn't want my child in that lesson, because for me, I think that you're trying to deliberately plant seeds of confusion into the minds of very young, already confused children. My kid half the time thinks he's a T-Rex. I mean, this is the level of age groups that we're talking about. And I think that when you start trying to deliberately confuse these children, there's something not quite right about that.
I don't think they're deliberately trying to confuse them. Again, I think it's what's happening is their own trauma is fueling the motivation for them to try to help, but they're helping in the wrong way. Because you're bringing, like they said, the politics exists within adults, and you're trying to resolve it through
But what
children.
about the public money involved? So the NHS, I'm told, are skint. They're jumping in. I'm told the local councils are skint. They're contributing. You know, the government, which, by the way, we know the use of government skint because basically we have to fund it. So, or the British taxpayer, mainly the English, have to fund it. So this costs genuine amounts of money. Who decided? Yeah, I tell you what, this is what we're going to do. We're going to talk about these sensitive issues to 4-year-olds, and we're going to make them champions of the gay community or something. It is. Honestly, it is quite wrong. There's a lot that you can do with money like that to educate your children better. I don't think this is a good idea.
But that's why I think what's going to happen is, particularly like you say, mothers like yourself, what will happen is, I don't want my child in that lesson, and you'll find parents pulling their kids out of schools. Then those institutions will have their hand forced to really think about how well you do.
What about the Muslim community? I mean, I presume that they would just simply say, thanks very much, get up and take them out. And I tell you what, all communities will feel like this. Why is it the Scots don't rise up against this? Why do they say, oh, it's a good idea my local council are contributing this, good idea my government are contributing, good idea the NHS are contributing? They don't say anything. These things just seem to happen. Scotland is becoming a very, very odd place.
There has to be a shake-up to force that change. That's what I'm saying. Like, look throughout history about every change and evolution in society that has come. There has been the flashpoint. What we're living through in real time is the flashpoint on this issue, and over time it will evolve to find a settling ground. But things like this have to happen to shake up the system, to have this conversation, because otherwise, if they went yelling in a way that forced us to talk about it, we would not talk about it.
Well, I've got to say, credit where it is due, because there does seem to be a very tiny glimmer of common sense prevailing, and perhaps it comes off the back of this CAS report, because over in Scotland, they have announced actually they're going to be pausing what do you call it? The
puberty blockers.
Yeah, but what do you call it? What's other prescribing? That's the word. When they're trying to prescribe these children with puberty blockers now, so they're going to be pausing that. In Scotland, you've already seen that they're pausing it in England. I celebrate this enormously, because I think pumping a child's mind full of this notion that if you're unhappy, the kind of elixir to fixing all of your problems is to try and externally modify you to look like a boy, or vice versa. I think it's such a delusion. I think it's dangerous. I think it's untrue. And I think it has lasting medical impacts on those children. I don't think it should ever have been a thing in the first place. So I celebrate the fact it's been paused. Do you?
No, look, I do. Of course, the puberty blockers actually do start at 18 now. So actually they stopped. I'm not sure, I think it was the 15 and 16-year-olds they stopped today. The clinic in Scotland refused, as did other clinics, to hand over the data which showed what was the effect and what those children were like before they went in, and whether they should have ever have been granted any drug. So any time we've got this stop, and that lady who came up with the report,
Hilary Cass, Dr. Hilary Cass,
basically said that actually that there wasn't enough data to hand out any kind of drugs and make any kind of assessment of these children, so fantastic for her, and I hope one day she gets some fantastic award for doing all this. But on the puberty blocker, this was quite wrong, but. You know, there will be opportunities for people to contest this, but this was probably one of the best medical reports that there has been.
Julita?
Well, what I would say is that before everyone becomes very reactionary to the shock of this actually being done, and why it was done in the first place and now being halted, is always ask what led to it. Because when you speak to trans people, what they'll say is that what you're dealing with, particularly in a particular demographic of the trans community, is men who have transitioned to become women. Part of the thing they have to deal with, a lot of apprehension, a lot of fear, is that when you go out being identified to have been a man because you don't have the look, you're not passable as a woman. And what they'll say is that if only I transitioned sooner, all of those masculine attributes wouldn't have changed me to a point where I can't reverse it, no matter how much surgery, no matter how much transitioning. So they're thinking, if I'd started sooner. So again, that's where the problem lies. You're resolving an adult problem through children, and you shouldn't be, but understand the motivation. And those are the people you should be talking to, that at the end of the day, it's medically proven. The prefrontal prefrontal cortex doesn't develop completely until you're 25. They cannot understand the gravity of a decision like this when you are a child. So unfortunately, there are some things that, although you want it, you cannot have, because the decision that decision to be made should only be made by an adult. But you do appreciate that what they're trying to do is prevent a later trauma in life by giving those trans children the opportunity to not have to go through them.
I don't want anyone to experience trauma, and I don't doubt that there's a lot of children that genuinely think that they're the opposite sex, so I'm not doubting that trauma, but I don't think that the way that you avoid that trauma is by indulging the delusion. I think the kind thing to do is to work with that child, to tell them the truth, that if you're a biological male, you can't become a biological female. You just can't. It's a fact of life. You might not like it, it might cause you heartache, but it's true. So then you work with that child, not to diminish their feelings, because I believe that those feelings, I'm sure that they have them, I'm sure that they're real, and I'm sure that they're hurting them and really upsetting the family and all the rest of it, because it will be very traumatic for your child to be that sad. But the kind answer to this, surely, is to work with that child to help them become happy in actually who they are, rather than selling them a delusion and helping them to live a life.
Well, what about the other trauma? What about the trauma of those who are going through complicated worlds? They change, then they want to change back. What about that trauma?
That's why I say this is good. It will help that. But again, it's the language. But saying something, even a word like saying it's a delusion, you just have to recognise that there's a sensitivity that must be used in the approach to all discourse on the topic.
Register that. There you go. What do you think to it all? Get in touch. All the usual ways. After the break, do you trust the police? Apparently only 40% of people in England do. What do you make to that?
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow we'll see, again, plenty of April showers, some sunny spells and a chilly wind in the east. High pressure is slowly edging towards us, and it will bring many of us a fine day on Saturday. But for the time being, we've still got low pressure and weather fronts in control. They've been bringing rain across the north through the day, and that rain is now trickling southwards. So damp and drizzly for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast overnight. The southwest generally staying dry. With more cloud and more breeze, it is going to be a much milder night than last night. We started today with a frost in many areas. We'll start tomorrow at 7 or 8 degrees. A little colder in northern Scotland, where there will be a really chilly wind blowing. That will be a feature of the weather right across these eastern areas tomorrow, cold wind. Elsewhere, we'll start with a lot of clouds, a little bit of rain, but it should brighten up through the day. Certainly a much brighter day for Northern Ireland and especially western Scotland compared to today. Still a few showers dotted around through the afternoon, and again, it is going to feel chilly, particularly in the east with that wind, 9 or 10 Celsius. 14 or 15 further south. Temperatures will drop sharply on Friday evening. Some pockets of frost to start the weekend, but for many, it is going to be a fine day on Saturday. Decent amount of sunshine around. A bit more cloud and some patchy rain across northern Scotland. Still a bit breezy across East Anglia in particular, but for many, as I said, a fine day on Saturday. Not spectacularly warm, highs of 10 to 14 degrees.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm Julian Brett. In West Sussex, the northbound M23, 2 lanes are blocked by recovery work after an accident. That's from junction 9 for Gatwick Airport to junction 8 for the M25. Buckinghamshire, the northbound M40, we've got a broken down car blocking a lane from junction 4 for the High Wycombe Handy Cross roundabout to junction 5 for Stokenchurch. In Merseyside, the northbound M57 is partially blocked. There's been an accident this afternoon from junction 4 for Knowlesley to the A59 at Switch Island, and Merseyside, the eastbound M62, we've got a car having a tyre change at junction 7 for Rainhill Stoops. Cheshire, the eastbound M56, a lane is closed for emergency resurfacing repairs. That's at junction 14 for the Chester Services to junction 12 for Runcorn. There's more in half an hour.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry till 7, the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the broadcast journalist Judita De Silva alongside me. I asked you a very simple question before the break. Do you trust the police? I'm asking because apparently only 40% of people in England say that they do trust the police. Let me start with you. Do you trust the police?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do.
All of them, implicitly?
No. Look, they are people, right? And in many areas of life, even our leadership in Parliament, right, there are some hopeless people. And when you employ as many people as the Met does, for instance, you're going to have more bad eggs than normal. However, at the end of it all, and I have some knowledge just recently in my wider family of being involved in the police in quite a sensitive area, they were fantastic, unbelievably fantastic, intelligent, caring, detailed. I wouldn't do it. So the problem is that every so often something happens. And when something happens, because people are involved, tens of thousands of people actually are hired in the police force, hundreds of thousands. And so when that happens, then everybody gets the blame for it. And I find that if I were a police officer, I don't know why I would continue to do it. And the one aspect is that when something goes seriously wrong, it damages the authority of the ordinary police officer who says to a bunch of louts, "Oi, you lot, clear off, or I'm going to arrest you." And then they start giving him the most terrible gobloat, and the police officer can do nothing about it. He or she just has to sit there and listen to this vile stuff being
Look at this clip that I'll play you now. Some of you might have already seen this clip because it went absolutely viral on social media. But look at what this group of kids did with this police car. So long story short, I'll describe it. So some copper was chasing somebody and he jumps out of his car. He left the keys in the car and went on pursuit of whoever it was he was chasing. So the kids then jump in the car, start reversing, kind of doing, not wheelies, but whatever, donuts or whatever you want to call it, in this police car. This was all filmed. People were absolutely hysterical. It was absolutely viral all over Twitter. And you see, for me, this is one of the problems, Judita, the lack of respect towards the police.
Well, you see, like they've played a hand in that as well, because when you think of something like Baroness Louise Casey's report that found the police to be institutionally racist, sexist and homophobic, it's not just isolated incidents. From that report, she even said the entire thing needs to be broken down and rebuilt.
Was that the Met Police?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with such high-profile transgressions of such a deplorable degree, that breaks apart a belief in the structure actually functioning to do the job that you've put them, your taxes pay for them to do. And so when you have that, you've fundamentally lost the respect. So, and also when you're thinking about it, when I said with the police, there's always been that perception that people talk about of the blue wall of silence, that if there's a police officer doing stuff that's bad, you cannot say absolutely nobody knew. And there has to be a reporting structure where you police yourselves within the system and not being seen as a traitor. Because the reason police officers don't talk about it is they don't want to be shut out by being seen as a traitor or going against the brotherhood or the sisterhood or whatever. You have to change that. And that's when they talk about changing the institution itself. Because if you don't change the way it functions, problems will keep on being spat out. And those problems can be heinous at times.
I want to bring... I'm going to carry on this conversation, actually, because there's lots I want to get into. But Stuart says, I wouldn't trust a police officer to walk my dog. Now, I read that and I actually feel... I wonder, are you a serving police officer? And what do comments like that make you feel? Someone says, Brian says, the police persecute the easy target, the ordinary decent people, instead of the criminals that they are actually scared of. Gemma says, I do trust the police, however, not all of them, certainly not implicitly. Often, she says, they found themselves compromised. John says, trust in the police has absolutely gone. David says the police have been captured by the work establishment and they enforce the law in a political fashion. So let me ask you this question then. Do you think that we should have a police force or a police service? Do you think there's a difference between the two? And which one, if a police officer is acting in a forceful manner as opposed to more perhaps in an engaging manner, what do you think is the most effective style when it comes to policing in society? Do we need more of a service and less of a force, or vice versa? Tell me your thoughts. We'll carry on this conversation in 2.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TfL bosses have come under fire after banning an advert... Oh, God. They've banned an advert for a comedy show because it had a hot dog on it, because that supposedly promotes obesity.
The comedian Ed Gamble has swapped the image of the fast food favourite in favour of a cucumber instead. And there's the cucumber on the plate.
So is the UK turning into a nanny state? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, and nutritionist Olivia Parry. Good to see you both this morning. Olivia, it's a comedy show. He's not promoting eating hot dogs, is he? Is this just a load of nonsense?
The thing is, we have a huge problem with overweight and obesity in this country. We're 4th in Europe. It's big business. Advertising for food companies is big business. They make so much money. You just have to switch on primetime TV to watch, food after food advertisements. And it's for the youngsters as well, who don't have the nutritional education. We're not taught cookery in school anymore. People go to college and to university, they don't know how to cook.
But
and it leads
forgive me for jumping in, Olivia. Forgive me for jumping in, but the whole point with this is it's an advert for a comedy show.
Yes, I know, but this is a wider issue.
I think it's a load of old tosh, to be quite honest with you. It's a hot dog. In fact, I wish they'd have put onions on the hot dog. A bit of what you fancy won't hurt you. You should eat 80-20 anyway. We talk about a nanny state. I actually think, arguably, we're becoming an authoritarian state. Opinions banned. Comedy banned. The England flag banned. It's like we've got to wear a virtual muzzle.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Judita De Silva, Kelvin Mackenzie remain alongside me. We're talking about the police and the fact that only 40% of people in England apparently trust the police. I was asking you, do you think that we need to have a police force? Because I do wonder whether or not we've just become a little bit too much of a, we're your friends, we're going to get among you, we're going to, take the knee with you, we're going to paint our cars to show solidarity with your sexualities. And I just think that actually there probably should be a little bit of distance perhaps between the police officers, the community. No?
No, because I think that what needs to actually happen is that there has to be a delineation between categories of police officers. I think there is a virtue in the idea of the community officer, someone who actually gets to know people in the locale. So he becomes a figure of trust, someone you can go to. When you cultivate that relationships, people feel more protected and they feel that you're more representative of their day-to-day concerns.
So do you think police officers should have been doing stuff like taking the knee with the BLM protesters?
That one, I just felt that was a bit performative because part of the problem that BLM spoke to was caused by the institution that is the police and the things they've done. I mean, the flashpoint was George Floyd. That was an issue with the police. So now taking the knee...
But that was in America.
No, but that's what spawned the UK one. It's bled worldwide to Africa, to the Middle East. It spread worldwide to Europe. So it's indicative of a problem that all black people identified with. And then when you think about it, I've always said that for people in the army, whether you're in the army, in the police force, there is a certain amount of psychological testing that you should have to go through, which goes back to the point you made about politics. To give a person power, you have to know that they are capable of holding it responsibly. And that's why I feel there should be psychological testing and profiling before you're given a gun or given that kind of power.
What do you think to that, Kelvin?
Well, I think one of the issues that we face is that many of us, and I'm just as guilty, do not know enough officers. They aren't in my social group. They're obviously, because of my work, they're not. I don't see them at work, and therefore, do I really understand the problems that they have, and would they share them with me anyway? So you end up with a situation where I suspect that mainly officers know other officers, socialise with them, and enjoy their lives in that rather narrow way. And I don't think that's a good thing. I'm not saying it can be easily resolved. I'm just saying I think that's a problem. Then you come to the issue in relation to minorities. So when you see that polling, the average is 45%, but for minorities, it's 31%. They really feel that the police have a down on them. Now, the stats show, actually, they don't have a down on them, but there are more of them arrested, presumably because they carried out more crimes. I can't believe the police force in our country is saying, oh, I tell you what, we must arrest a whole load of minorities today.
But then you're invalidating the findings
causes the problem. That causes the problem.
Report. You're invalidating the findings of the KC reports. That was a well-researched report that proves that it's
No, what they said was, what that report, the point it was making was that these people have unacceptable approaches to life. But it didn't say it makes them arrest more people of colour. No, it didn't say that. What it specifically said that this is how they are.
Yeah, the numbers and the approaches and the execution of duties were all taken into account when putting together the report. And also the fact is, when you think of stop and search and racial profiling, what would drive that 34%?
Are you in favour of stop and search?
I'm not in favour of stop and search.
Why?
Because I think that the way it's been executed, again, the theory of it, I completely agree with, but the execution, no. And that's why I say it goes back to my point. How do you fix it? Is you have to understand, you have to do psychological profiling of who becomes officers.
I do buy that.
The minute you ask the question, why do you want to become a police officer? You begin to identify the fracture lines in the psychosis which drives them to abuse power. But the theory of stop and search, I completely agree with. It just is executed poorly.
Tell me quickly, because I'm almost out of time, so quickly, I mean, I've literally got 30 seconds. Tell me why you think it's executed wrongly.
Because the people who suffer from it the most, it's a disproportional amount...
But who are the people that are carrying the knives? Are they? Look, I mean, if I'm stopped under stop and search, that would be ludicrous, wouldn't it? But if a young minority member is stopped,
but then,
is there anything wrong with that?
According to the perception, if you're
After all, the minority mothers are the ones that are weeping so much when somebody of colour is knifed. They're the people. They're the people that presumably want to have stop and search.
According to the perception field, if you're young or an ethnic minority or working class, you're a danger to society.
No, that is not true. But somebody is knifing somebody of colour to death, and they appear to be of colour. So you should stop and search them.
Time for. What do you make stop and search? Have a good night. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. Tomorrow we'll see, again, plenty of April showers, some sunny spells and a chilly wind in the east. High pressure is slowly edging towards us and it will bring many of us a fine day on Saturday. But for the time being, we've still got low pressure and weather fronts in control. They've been bringing rain across the north through the day and that rain is now trickling southwards. So damp and drizzly for the Midlands, East Anglia and the southeast overnight. The southwest generally staying dry. With more cloud and more breeze, it is going to be a much milder night than last night. We We started today with a frost in many areas. We'll start tomorrow at 7 or 8 degrees. A little colder in northern Scotland, where there will be a really chilly wind blowing. That will be a feature of the weather right across these eastern areas tomorrow, cold wind. Elsewhere, we'll start with a lot of clouds, a little bit of rain, but it should brighten up through the day. Certainly a much brighter day for Northern Ireland and especially western Scotland compared to today. Still a few showers dotted around through the afternoon, and again, it is going to feel chilly, particularly in the east with that wind, 9 or 10 Celsius, 14 or 15 further south. Temperatures will drop sharply on Friday evening, some pockets of frost to start the weekend, but for many it is going to be a fine day on Saturday. Decent amount of sunshine around, a bit more cloud and some patchy rain across northern Scotland. Still a bit breezy across East Anglia in particular, but for many, as I said, a fine day on Saturday. Not spectacularly warm, highs of 10 to 14 degrees.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm Julian Brett. In West Sussex, the northbound M23, 2 lanes remain closed for recovery work after an accident. That's from junction 9 for Gatwick Airport to junction 8 for the M25. Buckinghamshire, the northbound M40, we've got a lane closed here as well. A car has broken down from junction 4 for the High Wycombe Handy Cross roundabout to junction 5 for Stokenchurch. Into the West Midlands, the southbound M42, 2 lanes have been blocked. A car's broken down between junction 6 for Birmingham Airport and junction 5 for Solihull. And into Merseyside, the M62 eastbound, we've got a car having a tyre change. A lane is blocked on the exit slip at junction 7 for Rainhill Stoops, and the eastbound M56 has a lane closed for repairs at junction 14 for the Chester services. There's more in half an hour.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of